Live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, it's WVLT at the Titanic.
Good afternoon from Pigeon Forge and the Titanic Museum Attraction. I'm Kyle Grainger.
I'm Brittany Tarwater. We are so glad that you are here as we celebrate this special day and this exhibit that you can come to see. Of course, if you've been through Pigeon Forge, then it's hard to miss the Titanic and how big it is, Kyle.
Right when you come over that curve out of Sevierville right into the heart of Pigeon Forge, you see the ship, you see how massive it is. But just to think that this was built 1/3 of the scale of Titanic, the original ship that sank back in 1912. Of course, this museum opening back in 2010.
Yeah, so it really is, I mean, the magnitude of just looking at it on the outside, but I think you really feel the depth and the size and the power of these stories when you step inside and you get to see all of the artifacts that came from the ship. You almost get to be taken back in time and learn the stories of the people on board.
And over the next hour, we're going to tell you about some of those stories. We're going to find some of those artifacts along the way. We're also going to talk to the folks who've made this a reality, not only in Pigeon Forge, but in Branson. And every day this crew comes, Brittany, to honor the 2,224 passengers and crew that were on board Titanic from 47 different countries.
And of course, we all learned so much about the Titanic when the movie came out back in 1997. And there is such a strong connection from the movie that, of course, everyone around the world knows, to this museum and the founders of this museum. That really is where some of the truth came from.
Yeah, you can see opening today the exhibit, the door panel that Rose and Jack were on.
The door panel.
Once the ship sank, Rose was on that door. Now that is on display here in Pigeon Forge in the movie gallery. You can also see the Oscars that film won. You can also see
the wall of them.
The wall of them, yes, there were a lot of them. The violin that every cast member signed, including Cameron, signed just 5 days ago before the install here in the museum, and so much more from that story. But you mentioned the connection to Titanic here in Pigeon Forge.
This piece, I really enjoyed this because I loved, when I was watching the movie, I really enjoyed seeing everything that Rose was wearing, and you see the outfit that she was wearing as the ship was going down, the dress that she wore, that Kate Winslet wore in the movie, and the jacket that Cal gave her, that's on display alongside a life jacket that also, as you mentioned, some signatures. That life jacket signed also by Kate Winslet. So you get to have a glimpse of real life, but you also get a glimpse of the real makings of this movie.
Well, that glimpse into her life is the glimpse into the lives of the first-class passengers that were on board, to be countered with the third-class passengers who maybe spent their entire life savings just to get on this ship to come to America. And tying that whole story is what the founders have done a very good job here. Of course, John Jocelyn, one of the co-founders, led his own expedition down to Titanic, and when they went to create that movie, James Cameron called Jocelyn and said, hey, can I take a look at some of that video that you had? I want to see what you found down there. So that's where the tie-in comes back to the film and to the building of Titanic here in Pigeon Forge.
Exactly, making sure that all of those details are correct, all those stories are told appropriately. And people, this museum, this part of the museum took several months to put together, and people really showed up for it.
There was a line of people that have been coming through all day. They were here all morning long, coming through, wanting to see this iconic piece of movie history. Remember, this is not even from the actual Titanic. It is from the movie there. But of course, that movie being one of the biggest grossing movies of all time, filmed back in 1997. And to this day, people still fall in love with the Titanic story and the Titanic movie as well.
And when you come here, you get to be a part of it as well. So the ticketing experience, the storylines, like I'm saying, it all comes back to the people who are on board. You get to be a part of it. Kyle, what do you say we go get our boarding passes?
Yes, let's go right on in, check out how things are looking in the museum. We're going to find out who you are, what your role was on the ship, whether you're a crew member or a passenger, and then we move through to find out your journey and your destiny.
I'm so excited to get on board the Titanic, and if you've never been here, one of the things that makes this very special is that you're assigned a character as you get your boarding pass, and you get to learn more about who this person was, what their interests were, what they brought on the ship, and you really go along the museum and learn their story.
And your first stop is right here to find out who you're going to become and the role you're going to assume on the ship here. So I'm going to be Thomas Knowles. He's a fireman's messman, so he's working down in the boiler room of Titanic.
Oh, I've got a good one. I am Lucille Carter, 36-year-old from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I have 2 children. And I was in the first class, first class passenger, and I do believe that there are some interesting nuggets that we'll learn about Lucille, about me, as we get on board.
And me as well, so we'll go inside and start our journey to learn about the Titanic, the crew, and the passengers.
Let's go.
So now we're down in the boiler room. This is where I would have worked on Titanic. Could you imagine working in this room, 100-degree temperatures for 10 hours a day, shoveling coal into the furnace?
Now let me bring you into something special. This is one of just 2 millionaire suites. And look how big this is. There are 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a dining room, and a private outdoor suite. So plenty of space to be spacious. And again, just one of 2. But if you look around, if you've seen the movie, this is going to start ringing some bells.
So this is the memorial room. This is where you find out if you lived or died. I, as a crewman working on the ship, find out I did survive. I also served as a rowman to get the lifeboats away from this sinking ship.
Yeah, I was looking for my name as well, and I actually did find mine on the name of the survivors here, Lucille Carter, my daughter, 13-year-old, and then carried over here to my son, just 11 years old, and my husband. So my whole family survived. But Kyle, this is a really powerful part of the museum because, I mean, the list of names of people who perished, this is really where those stories...
There are far more names on the lower end of this who did not survive than those who did survive Titanic. But of course, this is where you find out that, and they pay tribute to this every day to the 2,224 people who were on Titanic. And of course, the Titanic plan, the plan to build Titanic, those architectural drawings delivered this month exactly back in 1908.
Wow, that's really something. You know, this attraction, this museum draws in 1 million people a year. I mean, think about the magnitude. People all around the world are just fascinated, but get the experience here because they really work so hard to make sure that each fact, each corner, each piece of information is embedded in the truth.
And in fact, as the time goes along, as they find new information, new facts about Titanic, new facts about the passengers, the story may change. And that's something that they have done over the years. And of course, the co-founder of Titanic, John Jocelyn, long before he became fascinated with Titanic here in Pigeon Forge, building this ship, he was working in television, producing television specials.
I had this big dream.
John Jocelyn, at an early age, said he had a dream to produce television.
I went to school in Los Angeles for college, and I went back to Wisconsin, and I had a business, and it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, and I thought, I'm going back to Los Angeles again.
Shortly after returning to Los Angeles, Jocelyn found his first big adventure. Produced 2-minute entertainment clips for local stations.
There was a very important man in my career, still a very important friend, called Doug Llewellyn. Doug Llewellyn, of course, was on-air talent for CBS in those days, and he and I, and my wife and his wife, struck up a really great friendship.
One by one, stations all over the country were buying in.
We started off, and all of a sudden, you could see the station building, and pretty soon we had over 200 television stations. Tribune was just knocking it out of the park. It was all in first-run syndication.
Of all the excitement tonight is a block-long cement vault in the basement of the old hotel.
Jocelyn then wanted to take television to the next level. He opened Al Capone's safe live on television. More than 28 million people tuned in to watch.
You know, we're going to pull open that door. They cut it, we put dynamite in there, and they blew it open, and unfortunately, there was nothing in it. Except an old sign, which I still have to this day, said Adams Express Company.
Thinking he's got to do something big for the next broadcast, it was 1985 and the Titanic had just been found, leading to John Jocelyn, the explorer, whose goal was to show the world Titanic.
We just gotta like this thing different if we're gonna go to the bottom of the ocean. So we worked with, Doug and I had gone to Paris and met with a company called IFREMER, which stands for Institut Français of the Sea. And we told them what we wanted to do, and they said, we're on board.
We are back live at the Titanic, and of course we have much more to come here on WVLT in this 4 o'clock hour.
A really special treat for you, the only Bible that they pulled off of the ship. It's here. We're going to see it live in person, and it has a tie to Knoxville. We'll be right back.
You're watching WVLT at the Titanic, live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge.
The stories of the Titanic stretch all around the world, but we found a connection. Did you know that there's a tie to Knoxville? Our first mate, Jody, here to explain. Jody, this is just incredible that we can look in our own backyard and see connections to the ship.
It is. When I go to the schools and talk to the students and they find out there's a tie to Knoxville, Tennessee, their little eyes get so big. So the tie is Reverend Bateman. Reverend Bateman, he opened churches and missions in desolate parts of cities throughout America. In 1890, he was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and built a church called People's Tabernacle off Clinch Avenue and 22nd.
And there is quite a fascinating story about a Bible. Can you tell us about that story?
Absolutely. In 1912, Reverend Bateman lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and he decided to go back to England to study an orphanage so he could bring that structure to his orphanage in Jacksonville. Well, when he was in England, he decided to surprise his wife with her sister. So the last thing he did was put his sister-in-law in a lifeboat, gave her his neckerchief to keep her throat warm, and his Bible. So it's the only Bible to make it off the Titanic, and it was Reverend Bateman's.
Just amazing stories, and to think so close to home, too. You just are full of knowledge. Thank you for sharing that one. We've got much more to come from the Titanic.
Back live outside of the Titanic, we have the Titanic Museum curator, Paul Burns, with us. And Paul, you've been working with Titanic artifacts for more than 35 years, and you brought us a special treat direct from Branson, the Bible that Brittany was just talking about, the Bateman Bible.
That's correct. It belonged to Reverend Bateman on board the vessel. When the ship began to sink, he presented the Bible to his sister-in-law, Ada Ball, to give it to his wife as a prized possession.
What is significant about this? The museum has shown this for a couple of years now, and when you guys first opened it up for the first time, it opened to a very significant verse.
Yes, we had the Bible. We've had the Bible for about 10 years now, and when we first opened up the Bible, it opened up to John 3:16. Now, this particular Bible is a Greek New Testament Bible, so obviously you couldn't read the verses, but we kept it open that way because ever since when we display it, because it was kind of kismet, if you will, when we opened it and thought it was unique. There's also an inscription on the Bible where his wife presents it to a Dr. Upperman. He was also a reverend in 1915 in remembrance of her husband for giving up his seat on a lifeboat for her sister.
And of course, many people come through the museum, they see this, they hear the story. One of the many stories of telling the word of Scripture and spiritual stories on Titanic. Would you just hold us up a little bit? It's in Greek. Of course, very careful using the white gloves to make sure we're not getting any oils on it, but that's the inscription.
Open to the inscription from his wife to Dr. Upperman as she presented it to him in 1915. And then I can open up just in any page to show you that it's in Greek, right? As we always say, I can't read Greek myself, so we're at a loss there.
A very significant part of the Titanic story.
Hugely significant. There was 9 clergy on board altogether. There were 8 that did the whole sailing, and they were significant in their roles as heroes as the ship was sinking, no doubt.
And you've called Titanic the never-ending story of Titanic.
Absolutely. We feature all the passengers and crew on board. We believe that the best way to pay tribute to them is to continue to tell their stories every single day within the museum.
All right, and coming up on WVLT during this special about the Titanic, we're going to take a closer look at some very important artifacts that are inside, some of the only ones ever to be on board Titanic and come off when we come back.
You're watching WVLT at the Titanic, live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge.
This room is what Titanic refers to as the Father Brown room. He took the only images that exist of Titanic while she was afloat. That includes making the final stop in Ireland before he got off of the ship. He bought this, a pin cushion for his mom. Jody, let's talk about Father Brown and his important role that he captured when he captured those pictures of Titanic.
Well, Father Brown had just graduated. He's now a Jesuit priest, and his uncle knew that he loved anything that has to do with ships and boats, so he gave him tickets on the world's biggest ship, Titanic. The clicker was he got on the ship in Southampton and off the ship in Queenstown, Ireland, with what we now know is 160 pictures of the only photos of life on board the Titanic.
And he bought a memorable item, like in the gift shop, just like we buy when we're on a trip, this for his mom.
He did. Titanic was one of the first ships to have a gift shop. It was in the barber shop, so who knows if he got a shave and a cut. But he saw this beautiful pincushion, of course, thought of his mom, and it is like of a life preserver, and it says Titanic, RMS Titanic on it. So we like to think it was like the last artifact that was getting off the Titanic while she was still afloat. Because these people that you see in these pictures, they don't know within 3 days that they'll be fighting for their lives.
A very memorial point that's here inside of the Titanic. And of course, you can come and see all these pictures and read all of the stories behind them inside of the museum.
Welcome back, and thanks for being with us today. We have a very special guest, Mr. Craig Sopin, who is a collector of Titanic artifacts. And Mr. Sopin, we're going to see a lot of the stuff that is part of your collection in here. Walk us through that journey. Why did you get started? How was your interest sparked in the Titanic?
Well, most people get interested in Titanic from reading a book or watching the Cameron film,
Sure.
or even A Night to Remember. Mine's a little bit different. I was walking by a library one day and saw the headline, Titanic sinks on its maiden voyage, and I thought to myself, how could that possibly happen? I went in and read the paper. It got me interested in the story. I saw an autograph for sale. I bought it. I learned about the person who signed that piece of paper. And every time I saw something else available, I figured that's going to be a new learning experience.
Wow.
I love to learn, and it just became a passion for me until the time I got about 300 to 400 artifacts, many of which are here.
So walk us through some of what we can see in your collection, maybe some of the things that are the most special to you.
Okay. So there is a sign, which today we would call for rent. The sign says to let. A second-class passenger, Samuel Herman, put it on his lawn because he wanted to rent his house while he came to America. And it says, very poignantly, to let, April 10th, 1912, the very day that Titanic was leaving. And the ironic part and the sad part about the story is that he never made it to America, and yet his sign did, because it's now in my collection, and it can be seen here. There's an engineer's collection. Very few things have been uncovered that concern the engineers on Titanic. They were a very special group because they're the ones who kept the lights on until the very end, and not a single one of them survived. And there's a collection here that concerns the senior fourth engineer, Leonard Hodgkinson. There's so much more that can be seen here. There's a sign from the pub that the crew went to, some of the crew went to the day before the Titanic went out in Southampton, and the name of the pub was the Grapes. An original sign from the Grapes pub is here on display. And I like to collect unique things that there are only one of, and I have a lot of that, and a lot of that is what can be seen here.
It's such a personal connection. Why are you so willing to share it with the rest of the world through this museum?
Well, this has been a passion for me, and I'd like for that passion to be shared. I'd like for other people to see this, because they're not going to see it anywhere else, since these items are unique. So I have that calling to try and get the public to see some of these things, and I love to come to this museum and see so many people looking at it. I sort of like to stand behind them sometime and see what their comments are about these things and what their questions are. And I had an opportunity to do that today as well.
Well, we appreciate you very much because you have been able to open the door to so much learning to so many people. I really appreciate you sharing this collection with us.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
All right. And of course, we have talked about the history, the truth, and the stories behind not just the museum, but also what you're seeing from the movie, and there is a deep connection. Kyle Grainger continues his conversation with John Joslin.
In 1987, John Joslin set out for his new television special on the next big find, the Titanic. He co-funded an expedition to the bottom of the ocean, and for the first time ever, the pictures of what the ship looks like after almost 100 years.
P.H. Nargelet was our head scientist on it, and he said, when we see something inside the submersible, we'll mark it on our map, and then we can plan our dives later on in the next few weeks here as we're diving.
Nargelet was one of 5 people killed in the Ocean Gate tragedy in 2023. He helped develop Joslin's dives to preserve history of the items they collected off Titanic.
At the end of the day, like I say, they kept all these pieces, and you see a basket come up, and you see that big A-frame on that ship lean over and pick this thing out of the water and set it on the deck. It's pretty exciting and thrilling, to say the least.
But it was also about capturing the moments in darkness. So Joslin had to go to the camera companies to get special cameras built and the lighting so they could see below the ocean at 12,000 feet.
You come up over that bow, and there's other ones shining, and you can see all the lighting poles and masts and things like that up on the ship. It's pretty exciting to see that shot. And they came up and said, okay, John, here you take a look at this. And I got down that porthole, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes this bow of the ship, and I'm seeing the lower part, and I'm trying to see the upper part and craning my neck and look up. You can't see the top of the ship.
Joslin said at the time he didn't know this journey he captured for television would then capture his own attention, and that would lead to a career-changing move. Has your interest in Titanic grown since you saw it at the bottom of the ocean, or is it about the same, or?
Oh, of course it's grown, because you know what's great about it, Kyle, is, A, it's one thing about the ship, of course, when you start off, but then as we've gotten into it over the years, it's really about the passenger stories. That's what brings Titanic alive. When you think of all the passengers that were on board, and different levels, first class, second class, steerage, well, that's a pretty big deal, you know?
Over the next 2 decades, Joslin collected artifacts and stories from survivors, of which he used in a traveling museum exhibit before building the permanent locations in Branson and Pigeon Forge.
Guys, we got to record these people. And Doug, my partner, did a lot of those interviews, you know, going over and see Edith Hausman. She was a kid on board, you know, and Bertram Dean. And you had to hear them. Now, a lot of them were so young, they had really no idea, you know, a couple of them were babies and you wouldn't have any recollection. But other ones just remember the panic that night getting into those lifeboats.
You're watching WVLT at the Titanic, live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge.
Welcome back to Pigeon Forge, live outside the Titanic Museum Attraction. Of course, millions of people have come from all over the world over the past couple of years. We're going to continue telling the stories of Titanic today. And in this next hour, you're going to meet some of the people who've worked with John Joslin over the years.
If you've been here, then you've never quite seen it like this. A bit of movie magic is coming to the museum. As you can see, many artifacts, new stories, new experiences that are rooted in truth, but also things that you'll see quite famously from the movie.
Yeah, we'll show you that door that Jack and Rose were on, that iconic moment where they said, "I'll never let go." That is being recreated in the museum here. And of course, you get to see the life jacket that Kate Winslet wore. She signed it. The violin that the band was playing that night, that Hartley violin. And of course, so many more stories of the first, second, third class passengers and the crew on board of Titanic.
That is I think the most moving part of the experience here is learning the stories of the people who were on board and honoring their memories. And that's certainly a piece that they live here every single day. But when we think about the Titanic, especially in the movie, we'd be remiss to not recognize the famous staircase.
Of course, everyone wants to take their picture on the staircase in the movie. That was the moment where Jack said, "Meet me at the clock." And of course, you get to walk the grand staircase as it was designed on Titanic, inside Titanic in Pigeon Forge. Here we are inside the Titanic Museum Attraction. This is the grand staircase, $1 million staircase filled with gold leaflets, flooring that is the first of its class of the time. Jody is with us now. And Jody, this may be one of those moments that guests coming inside of Titanic, they want their picture taken here.
Absolutely. It is the crown jewel of the Titanic. And as soon as they round that corner, you can see their face. They're here in first class.
This gives you a real sense of what it was like to be on board.
Absolutely. You can see the grandeur, the elegance, the attention to detail that White Star did on Titanic and her sister ship, the Olympic.
And we've been looking at some of that. I mean, some of this is handcrafted, and this has been built to scale.
It is to scale. We use the original blueprints. It's hand-carved oak, walnut, and mahogany, and then stained light honey in color. Now, my favorite part, you sort of hinted about the floor. Can I tell them?
Go right ahead.
So it's my favorite Titanic fact, and to watch our passengers' faces when they find out that it was the most luxurious floor you could buy. It was more expensive than granite and marble. We called it the millionaire's flooring, but you know it as linoleum. That's right. Linoleum was the thing. So if you have linoleum in your home, you're Titanic rich. Congratulations.
So I'm living first class at home.
You are, yes. Well, actually, in real life, my chicken coop is first class.
Okay, well, that's pretty good for the chickens. But Titanic, you come around the corner, they get to take their picture there now as well.
They do. We started allowing pictures in the museum from the grand staircase on a little over about a year ago. Everything on the second floor you can take pictures of. So this has been a stopping point. Everyone wants to pose, do the Jack and Rose. Oh, meet me at the clock.
Everyone dreams of that, right?
Exactly.
So this is the grand staircase, the $1 million staircase inside of the Titanic in Pigeon Forge. When we interviewed John Jocelyn earlier, you heard from him about working with someone he said was life-changing. Doug Llewellyn, you might remember him from People's Court, is airing on your television sets, and he is with us in Pigeon Forge to talk more about working with John Jocelyn over the years.
Well, John and I were partners on this production, and we leased a submarine from an organization known as Ifremer in France, which owned the only other submarine in the world that could go that deep. At that time. There were only 2 subs. So we leased that sub and mounted a 2-month expedition on the North Atlantic. And in that period of time, we made 36 dives to the ocean floor to recover artifacts and then make filming of the Titanic and the giant debris field. I was the one who I did go down. It was an amazing experience. A lot of people think it must have been unbelievably exciting and scary.
Of course.
It could have been scary, but I got to tell you something. It's very quiet and calm. You're sitting in a submarine. It was a 20-ton submarine that's 26 feet long, $25 million cost. That as you go down in the water, there's no motion. It slowly spins as it goes down to the bottom. You lose all light from the surface after about 200 feet down, and from there on, you're in total darkness. We're preserving battery power, so there are no lights on in the sub. And it's 1 hour and 45 minutes all the way down. I was eating a cheese sandwich, drinking a Coke, speaking with 2 French pilots on the way down. Finally, we got to the bottom. We actually landed on the bottom, started up the sub, and then started flying. That's what they call it in submarine terms, at about 2 knots an hour. And the gigantic debris field that covers about 2.5 miles around the 2 parts of the Titanic. We were filming, we were observing.
deciding what artifacts we wanted to bring up. And this was all really done originally for a television special that we did from Paris called Return to the Titanic Live, which interestingly we did in Paris before a live audience at 2 o'clock in the morning, because it was 8 o'clock in LA on the East Coast at that time. It was an amazing experience, and all I can tell you is I wasn't afraid. I was very confident in the pilots that we had. A lot of equipment in that submarine, and we were in what was like a 6-foot titanium sphere, like a basketball. And there was only room for 3 people in the submarine, very cramped. But with all the equipment, and the submarine had arms that moved out in front, and you could reach out with, the pilots could do it, and pick up items as big as pots and pans, or as dainty as a teacup.
Yeah, a lot of stories to tell here.
Everything looked like it had just been put on the surface of the floor of the ocean when we got there.
Wow.
Even though it had been there 75
Preserved.
years.
How about
there
that?
was no sand in anything, there's no current at that depth. Very cold, 29 degrees. It was just an amazing experience.
And the pressure is what is so dangerous, and you have a way to demonstrate for us the pressure that you feel.
I want to show you something. One of the pilots got a couple of these 16-ounce coffee cups, put them in a mesh laundry bag on the outside of the sub, and then we went down on the dive. Then when we came up, we went around and looked at these cups, and let me show you what had happened. Instead of 16 ounces, the cups had shrunk to the size of a shot glass.
Wow.
This has been down to the Titanic area.
Wow.
It's been signed by one of the pilots. But that's 6,000 pounds of pressure at the bottom of the ocean. That's what it does to a 16-ounce coffee cup. How about that? Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, what an amazing visual.
Amazing.
What are some of the moments, the scenes that stick out now that when you think back on your experience down? I mean, it's not often that we get to speak to somebody who has been down to see it, and I'm sorry, I'm getting the rap, so real quick.
A lady's shoe, all by itself, a pump, a high-heeled shoe, was laying on the bottom of the sand, and I have always thought, what if that shoe could have talked? I was haunted, have been haunted by that shoe. It was amazing.
Wow. So many stories to tell, and we appreciate you having a passion for sharing those stories.
Oh, you're welcome.
So that we can honor and remember those who were on board the Titanic.
Thank you, Doug. And of course, more to come live from the Titanic here in Pigeon Forge in just a moment.
You're watching WVLT at the Titanic, live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge.
Not only will a visit to the Titanic Museum Attraction step you back in time to 1912, but how about stepping inside of a French cafe? That is what happens here inside of the brand new custard shop, and of course, that being one of the treats that you would have been served on Titanic, and First Class Maid Jody is with us now. A new addition for you all in Pigeon Forge.
It is. So everyone wants to know what you eat on the Titanic, and of course, everyone's fascinated with desserts. But then they find out Titanic had 1,400 quarts of frozen custard. It was all vanilla, of course, but we have come up with our own recipe. We've been working on it for a year, and you're going to try it in just a moment, too.
Let's set this apart, though. You can have a little treat while you're waiting to get into the experience, so this gives guests an opportunity to just sit back and relax.
Absolutely. There's a couple things that happen. We sell out 2, 3, 4 hours in advance, or if it's raining, my favorite weatherman, we can sell out days in advance. So if it's just a few hours, though, it's hard to hit that Pigeon Forge Parkway and go anywhere. So they can grab something to eat here, just sit back for a few minutes and wait for their boarding time.
And of course, all kinds of things to experience inside of this as well. Sit back, relax, enjoy some frozen treats, a sandwich with your family and friends, and then board the Titanic.
You're watching WVLT at the Titanic, live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge.
And welcome back to the Titanic live in Pigeon Forge. Of course, these museums, both here and in Branson, Missouri, have been operating for almost 20 years, almost to the 20-year mark. It all started in Branson, but the ship here in Pigeon Forge, seeing millions of people come through.
Yeah, they really do. Sharing these stories, so important to them. That really is the overall mission. Pigeon Forge location opened April 8th. Here's some video from that day. You can see a little bit, well, this is some live video. There we go, video of the day. A little bit of a rainy day here. Regis Philbin was here as the MC to open it up, calling it the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen.
And of course, they opened the museum in Branson first. Now, that ship opened in 2006, also continuing to open the story of Titanic to the millions of people who come through there, learning about the passengers, the crew who are on board of Titanic, seeing the cabins built to scale, if you will, for the first class, and of course the grand staircase there in Branson as well. There's also iconic moments from the movie that you may recognize scattered throughout the ship.
We're standing now under the entrance of Grapes Pub inside the museum, but this is a significant piece of history in real life and in the movie Titanic. First Maid Jody, let's bring you in here. Tell us why this is so significant.
Everyone wants to know how close the movie is to real life. Well, Grapes Pub is where Jack won his ticket. So Grapes Pub is a real place. We have a picture of it right now. It's still open today. So you can actually go to Grapes Pub and have fish, chips, a pint of ale, whatever you like. In real life, a couple of the workers missed the ship because they were having a last pint of ale. And as I was telling you earlier, can you imagine being their wife? Angry. You no longer have a job because you had to have a pint of ale. And then 5 days later, you realize your husband's alive because he had that last pint of ale.
I can't even imagine.
You can't wrap your mind around it.
And you were saying you've done significant research. This is a real place in England, as you mentioned, but they don't play up their connection to the ship.
No, one of our authors, Penelope, has gone there, and she started talking to them about the Titanic, and they go, oh, yes, we have a Titanic table over here, but it's not like they market it, or either being from history or the movie, either one would bring people in droves, and they don't. They have a picture up, but that's about it.
It's where it all started, in the movie and in real life. How about that? Thank you. It's just fascinating to learn so much about this museum and its ties to history and to real life.
You're watching WVLT at the Titanic, live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge.
As John Jocelyn sets out on a business adventure in the early 2000s, he found himself working with a new business partner. His wife, Mary Kellogg, comes on board to help tell the story of Titanic, the passengers and crew. Their first location is Branson, Missouri, a place they'd never even been to.
As a kid, I grew up in a subdivision of Milwaukee, and we went to California a lot because I had relatives in Los Angeles, and we drove across country many times. I thought, I've gone past through the Springfield, Missouri, and I have no idea where Branson is.
They found an ideal location. Architects pitched the idea to retrofit an existing building into the iconic Titanic.
Explain to me what we're doing here with this ship. Hey, well, John's Titanic ship, we'll recreate the front half of it.
And I used to walk into his trailer all the time and say, if this looks like a tugboat, we're all dead.
Okay, and we'll just take up that whole new ship structure and we'll put it right over the other building.
Thank God he had the vision how to do it.
Well, everyone thought in Branson we were crazy, to say the least. You're covering up a building with another building? Yeah.
Admittingly knowing nothing about Titanic, Kellogg says she treated telling the Titanic stories like telling a story on TV, like the television shows she had produced. The first year, 500,000 people visited, leading the couple to expand their storytelling to the Great Smoky Mountains.
Now, Mary and I still live in Los Angeles, and Mary came in my office one day and she said, you know, John, this is really good. I said, yeah. What do you think if we build another one? What? So we did, and I said, it's going to be in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. She goes, well, where is that?
A story that's told with the passengers, crew, and artifacts you discover as you work your way through the museum.
We have more, but at any given time there's 400 that we try to put on display. What's interesting is we started out with a lot more on display, and what we realized is it becomes cumbersome for the guest experience. It's better to have less and more of a story. So we've cut back more than we used to have.
Both say every artifact, every person on Titanic has a story, and that story touches people today.
They come in kind of all thinking, and they get the boarding pass. Oh, now I'm going to be part of a real person's life. And now I'm going to travel through that ship and I'm going to learn more about the ship. But God forbid at the end I find out my destiny. And that's when it comes home. And that's what we do. When we have new crew members and they say, oh, Mary, I made somebody cry today, I said, that's good, because we touched their hearts. And that's what this museum is all about. And then you see the individual stories and how rich these people, if you think about the richest people we have in America today, and they were on that ship, it would be world history, what if that ship sank today. That's how big it was. So when you think about, it's the biggest ship in the world, everybody wants to be on that ship, and it's a celebration at the time. They're coming to America.
John, I'm sitting here talking to you, and I've been doing some research. You were named one of the 10 most people you should know a couple of years ago. What should we know about John Joslin?
I would say probably, if anything, you know, you care about people, you care about storytelling. I love producing shows, of course, producing whether it's a show in the museum or if it's on television or anything. But at the end of the day, you got to have a heart wherever you do.
And this story of how television producers helped the story of the Titanic live on in honor of the 2,224 on board the RMS Titanic on April 15, 1912. That story starts early for many as a child.
Somehow they gravitate to Titanic. Kids are mesmerized by that story. I mean, I was as a kid, and I remember very, very well my parents buying me a book about Titanic, and I went like, wow. But never did I think in those days, I thought, well, I could go at it. No, I didn't do that. And I went about my business, but it was pretty fascinating still how that piece of history lives on today.
Fascinating to hear the stories from the people who have seen it, who have studied it, and who are so dedicated to keeping the stories alive of those who were on board the Titanic.
And of course, impacting those of the youngest generation.
Oh, it's hard to see those baby pictures. Yes, it is. All right, we are right back with much more from On Board the Titanic.
Enter to win a pair of tickets to the Titanic in Pigeon Forge. Grab your boarding pass to experience one of the greatest stories in history. See genuine artifacts and memorabilia from the Oscar-winning film. Enter to win at WVLT-TV/contests.
You're watching WVLT at the Titanic, live from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge.
Welcome back live to the Titanic in Pigeon Forge. Of course, a day telling the stories inside the ship, just as they do every day, the lives of those on board.
And we're going to get back to this lovely lady who you may recognize from the movie in just a moment. But first, I want to take you inside something that you can see in the museum, and it is all made of Legos. Really hard to believe that this replica of the ship is made of Legos, thousands of them, all created by an 11-year-old boy. He was now 19 at the time. Now he is 19, 11 at the time when he made it. His name is Grainger from Iceland. And I mean, as you know, Legos can be quite pricey, so he put a call out, and people all around the world chipped in and helped support him as he built this ship with his grandfather.
And of course, that is inside the ship, inside the same room where the new movie display is. And of course, that's why Rose being here today is so significant, because that character of Jack and Rose so significant into all of this.
You have some details on your outfits, though, what you're wearing here and what you're doing.
Yes. So this is Rose's boarding dress from the movie. It's the first one that we actually see her in. And this is actually based off of a 1912 designer brand riding suit that they would have been
beautiful.
wearing.
You're here taking pictures with the folks. Thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you to Mary Kellogg and John Joslin for the information in this show today. And of course, thank you for being with us as we help tell the story as well.